I think we are pretty much ready to go today. We'll kind of a little non-traditional here with our virtual setting, but excited that we get to make this work for everyone, and of course invite people from all over the world to join us for our New Orleans Tableau user group. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Katie Wagner. I'm one of the co-leads along with Patrick for the New Orleans user group. And we kind of revived this user group about a year ago. We typically meet quarterly, so glad that we were able to keep this going. And our focus is really to help out folks in Louisiana and the surrounding areas with their questions in Tableau. So excited to be able to continue this as well as sharing it out with others. And as we were talking about people to present today, as well as content that we wanted to host, I think one of those perks of having this virtually is that we can have presenters from everywhere. So really excited to have my buddy Will here with us. And Will is going to give us a different perspective on Tableau. I know sometimes we attend these user groups and we're looking for more of the technical aspect. I will spend a bit of time during my session a bit later talking about some of those technical pieces. But Will's got a really interesting topic for us, this idea of planting and growing and harvesting dashboards. And especially now with, some of us maybe having a bit more time at home, I think it's maybe the perfect time to talk about this. So Will, I'm going to turn it over to you, but thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. So let me take over the share. There we go. I'll move our mugs out of the way.
And I'll do, just because we're seeing maybe some technical difficulties, I'll do a quick check. If any of you want to send over in the chat window or the Q&A, if you can hear us and you can see us okay and everything's looking all right.
Can you see my screen, Lex?
Yes. Cool.
Well, I'll just jump right into it, and hopefully Katie can resolve any technical issues. So hello, my name is Will Strauss. I'm currently a data visualization analytics consultant with a consulting firm called Clear Intelligence based near Boston, and I'll soon be joining the Amazon robotics team. And basically I make pictures out of numbers. That's what I do for work, but it's really only half of my job. So I want to talk about how the other half of my full-time job really balances out what I do and informs what I do. So if you don't recognize me here with my data hat on or my name, you might recognize some of my work. So I try to publish on Tableau Public as much as I can. And my favorite thing to do on Tableau Public is generate my own data sets as opposed to kind of shared social projects. I really have enjoyed going through that process of collecting and validating and analyzing my data before I really bring it to the viz stage. So if you're new to Tableau and you saw some of the stuff, you're like, wow, that's great that you can do that. This is two of the vizzes, like the first two that I published. The one on the right is endangered and at-risk species in Massachusetts, where I used to live. It's grotesque. It's just a bad overall viz, but it's one of my favorite visualizations, like the first one I put up. And then the one on the left, very important fantasy football dashboard. You always have to have those there. So I'm no genius. All I'm trying to do today is just share some of the tips that I've gotten from amazing people in our community and how I bring my perspective as a data farmer. So when I'm not visiting, I'm a data farmer. So somebody who splits their time between doing advanced analytics and visual analytics, anything, and then also growing crops and raising livestock and being a farmer. I grew up in an agriculture area, went to an agricultural high school, and it always stuck with me, including like kind of a very specific love of trees. Trees are my favorite thing on the farm. And I would call myself a dog lover because it's kind of like people with their kids. Like, I don't like your kids, I don't like your dog, but I love mine. I mean, look at my Khaleesi. She's so sweet. She's a cutie. My biggest family, my greater family, is I'm one of the organizers and the lead organizer of the Boston Tableau user group. And on the right there, I'm not sure where Wags is in that picture, but I know she's in there. She's there somewhere, probably dancing.
I'm
And
accidentally yelling in Andy's ear.
yeah, there you go. He loves that. So I'm a lot of involvement in the community, and it's really great that I'm able to kind of reach all the way down in Louisiana today. So I appreciate you guys having me. So quickly today, we're going to talk about biases that you can bring into data, a little bit of my process that I've picked up from multiple people, taking it from a raw idea or raw data set to final visualization, and just some other little tips and tricks along the way. So the first one is about forced perspective. Now, the visualization that I made that we're going to go over, I use this image, this really famous image of Uncle Sam. If you don't know who Uncle Sam is, he was actually a meat packer from Troy, New York. And they would be packing rations for soldiers, it would be stamped like US and then a digit code. And they would joke, oh, that stands for Uncle Sam. And then it kind of developed into this character. It was replacing the pre-Revolutionary War symbol of Columbia or Lady Liberty. And they really have these if you can look at them, they're people who are reaching out in some way. They're wearing the same pattern, they're wearing the same colors, but there's a very different feel. And this was one of the first kind of duality of images that I got introduced with, to the responsibility of how you're sharing information, because images are more powerful than stats very often. The reason that these characters were so successful is about 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5 Americans at the time that they were really popular couldn't read. So when they would pick up a newspaper, they would see cartoons of Uncle Sam and Brother John, who was a symbol for the common man or your citizens, and Lady Liberty, and they would really just kind of follow the cartoons. So when you are presenting images, there really is a greater understanding of everything that you're putting into it and how it's being received outward. And I also bring that into kind of the holistic sustainability that we try to exercise here on our farm. Silver Fox Farm is the name of our farm. So the first thing I do when I get a fresh data set in is I play what's that. So I get the data, I throw it into a whole bunch of different visualizations just to see what sticks. This happened to be for the first Iron Viz feeder last year, which was an agricultural data set. And thank you to Zen Master Chris Love and Alteryx Ace Chris Love for putting together this great little Tableau prep. I used his kind of format. I played it with a bunch of visualizations because it's really important. You don't have to make something pretty right away. Don't draw the image of what you're trying to get to. Just go in and play with the data, because you're going to see outliers. You're going to have immediate problems that you need to resolve. When we got in our first group of chickens, we did a straight run, and we had about half roosters and half hens. We still have a few roosters left, not as many, but we had one rooster named Red, who was very aggressive. And on the left, you can see my son Henry, who I also call Red. And he got his spur right across the eye. So I had to quickly resolve it. So I built that cone, and the next day, Red ate red soup. Sometimes when you get into that first stage, the big picture is going to be ugly. These are 2 scatter plots from the underlying data that I had at the county and the state level. They don't really tell an informed story. It's not something that you would show forward as part of like your final analysis, but it's still an important step to go through. It's one of the things I battle most with clients as a consultant, is like, well, that doesn't look very interesting when we pull up their data. It's like, yeah, your data is boring. Like maybe that's just how it is. But you just have to accept that your first inside look isn't going to be this brilliant insight that's always going to come out. You got to peel the onion. So as I went through the data and I started peeling, I found some interesting stories in the farm data. So I found, I was looking at increase in number of farms based on how big they were. So Georgia is basically being turned into a giant subdivision. North Dakota's economy is totally changing because how much land they're selling off for pipeline and fracking up there. There's huge farm consolidations in Tennessee, Illinois, and Louisiana, basically everywhere along the Mississippi Delta. Those small farmers are just continually getting gobbled up and gobbled up. The story that I chose to tell was that basically small farms are disappearing. Not only is it just that they're getting wrapped up and being consolidated, there are less and less small farmers. And if you think about the situation that we're in now, it's really great to have lots of local, small, diverse food source. And it's about approaching that sustainably. So the next piece of advice that I got is from one of my all-time data heroes, is Ann Jackson. And this is not anything that Ann Jackson would do. This is early stuff that I would do as sketches. This is something that Ann Jackson would do. Ann Jackson, when I first was introduced to her during her Dear Data series, and I would see these really cool postcards and letters and go back and forth, and there were these hand-drawn visualizations, and there was a method to it. They were using different colors, they were sticking with shape, just as they would a data visualization. So as you go through and you get to this early kind of whiteboarding stage, do take the time to use one color as a background, like your base wireframe color. Use one color, like I use red here for where is the eye gonna go in 5 seconds. And then I use a third color as I look back over it to kind of add in visualizations. Don't cheat this part of the process. You don't need to be an artist. You don't have to use a ruler. It doesn't have to be exact. Katie Schaub is, if you've ever seen her whiteboards, Katie Schaub from Montana, she runs the Big Sky Group. They're like, she uses a ruler and they're perfectly gridded out. Just get some scratchy pens, get some crayons. I've done it with crayon a lot. It's a really helpful part of the process, and it's not as silly as you think. When you're choosing your charts, these are my 2 favorite tools. On the top left is Andy Kriebel's Visual Vocabulary. On the bottom is Kevin Flerlige's Tableau chart catalog. The reason I like these too much is that Andy Kriebel's allows you to approach your chart selection from a concept. So if you have a specific business question that you're trying to solve with your data, you write out that business question. You can then take out individual parts or verbs, nouns, phrases, and then look them up. Is it a part to whole analysis? Or are we talking about something moving from left to right, a flow analysis? And the way his visualization, his catalog is structured is you click on it and it will give you a list of different visualizations that fit that concept. I'll then take that information and go over to Kevin Flerlige's because there's more interesting examples. There's a few variations off of a basic chart type. But if I can recommend any tools to start your chart selection process other than writing them on pen and paper, it's these 2 on Tableau Public. So what I did is I decided from that, if you remember from that original view, when I had a county level, everything was crunched down into like this little section here. I said, oh, I know how to solve that because I'm a professional data visualization person. I'm going to use a jitter plot. So I'm going to space out all of those little dots from each other and get some more room. Jitter plots are really cool. If you don't know how to do them, here's a really quick guide. You create the scatter or kind of whisker plot, however you want to have it, and then on that column shelf, just you can manually type it in or you can create a calculated field. Just type the word random, open and close parentheses, and it will give you a random value between 0 and 1. There's other ways to do it. You can use an index value that gives you some more control, and you can control the spread. But if you just want to do it quickly to see how it looks, so this was my plan. All right, I got these cool jitter plots. Fortunately, plans rarely work through the whole thing. Okay, when we first started our farm, I had planned of these really beautiful berry bushes and these nut bushes around our pond that were going to be our kind of immediate income source, and we had a lot of ducks. Unfortunately, we had a beaver who loved eating those nut bushes and those fruit bushes, and we had a bobcat. You see Robert here is our bobcat, and he took a lot of my ducks. So we had to change the plan. What ended up happening with the jitter plot, the reason it didn't work, not because it didn't work, but because I realized I could put in the population growth and make this a true scatter plot, and it was more interesting than just a random number. So now in the scatter plot, you could see vertically the increase or decrease in farm acreage in these buckets of how big the farm is, and then left to right if that county is also increasing or decreasing their population. But again, I had another problem. All the circles were basically the same size. I needed to figure out a way to use 0 as my middle point and then make everything get bigger as the farther it got away from 0 and smaller as it got towards it. This is really helpful in a BizViz standpoint if you have like a parameter control, that's some kind of rate that you want to track and you want to see individual performance against that rate and use size to exaggerate it. You don't need any crazy calculated fields. This is just from 0 formatting. So go up to your size edit the sizes, select from 0, and then pick just a symmetrical range on either side of how big or how small they're going to be. And then again, you get this really nice effect of things stand out the farther they are away from whatever your baseline is. In my case, it was 0. Something I learned from a very good friend of mine, Zach Bowders, is give the people what they want unless you want to do something else. So Zach Bowders is a great data artist. He runs the Memphis Tableau user group, and he has a great attitude about Tableau Public. He loves putting stuff up there, really visually interesting stuff, and he's just kind of, he separates this, I'm building stuff for myself versus, okay, this is for Iron Viz. Okay, so if it's for Iron Viz, you want to make Gen Pop happy and you want to make the judges happy. What is the general population like? They love maps. Everybody loves maps. I have a picture of Johnny Walker somewhere in my house that I just kiss every day because I love maps so much, okay? I don't care if Johnny hears that too. I don't care. So 3 different type of map marks that you'll use most often. Density maps. If you have lots of marks, you don't care about borders because they're totally arbitrary anyway, so who cares? And you happen to be an awesome person, use density maps. They look great. I just think they're beautiful. There's a lot of different color palettes that you can use that are really interesting. Filled maps is where you are very much focused on the borders. If you want to look at a map of Louisiana and you want to separate it by, not by counties, by parishes, see, we're Catholic up here too. We're French up here too. You know, you want to really specify those borders. That's a filled map. A mark map, I use mark maps quite a bit where I have less marks. So if it's just, say, major cities across the US and I wanted to vary the sizes on populations, that's a good one. In this case, there were just too many marks, so the density map was just right. The other thing, you know, if you want to impress a judge or you want to impress a concerning eye, it's the details. So in farming, I don't have a lawn, I have a pasture. We pasture raise, rabbits is our primary livestock. We have all pasture raised rabbits. And our pasture, the health of it, because it's been treated like a lawn for about a decade, is we're in the process of regenerating, which means we need every single pollinator we can get. There are more living beings in a quarter acre of living soil than there are people that have ever lived on the planet. Now imagine how many insects that takes and how many microbes that takes and fungi and bacteria and all the species that build this whole system. So the little tiny details do make a big difference. If you are new to Tableau and you're not sure how to format something, just right click on it. Chances are, no matter what it is, if you right click on it, you will see a format option come up that you can edit. If you can't, there's a little formatting specific thing that you can't figure out to do. Go search it on the community forum. You can use a Google machine. I happen to like the community forum because you could see who's answering, it's validated, there's more of a conversation that can happen there, and you can securely pass documents back and forth. Just don't send them your work data. And if you can't figure it out after that, you have to do something else. Another concept that's really important is balancing level of detail with interactivity. So this is one of my more popular, viewed vizzes that I had on Tableau Public. And this was a tool that I built for myself because I'm not that smart. I asked hundreds of farmers. I mean, an old gardener can give you a million tips. And I always heard these interesting comments about, well, if you want really good tomatoes, you got to grow basil with it. Well, if you want to get really good onions, make sure you don't plant cauliflower next to it. And I had no idea why. So there's all these really complex relationships. And as I started writing down, looking like they conflicted, they weren't always consistent. So I built this tool to essentially allow me to figure out what to plant next to each other. Oh, yeah, sorry, I have somebody bugging me right now. So this is one of our bunnies. This is a silver fox rabbit.
Hi.
Yeah. This is a
You're
blue.
a cutie.
Hi, sweetie. She was at the door. She's what, 3 weeks old? 3 weeks old. Sorry. She liked the viz, so she had to come in. Goodbye. Oh.
I'm going to interrupt you though, Will. Do rabbits like carrots the most?
Rabbits like sunflowers the most.
Aha, okay. Now you all
So
know.
they love carrots. Don't get me wrong, they like carrots. But we actually specifically plant sunflowers just for them to eat. They will take an entire sunflower plant, and all you will be left with is a strip stalk and this white thing that looks like a sponge. That's basically the base where they eat everything. And the seeds themselves, the oil is really good for their coats and their skin. So, yeah, we grow those right behind them.
Maybe that's the next viz. Maybe it's the things that animals eat.
So the next one I'm working on right now is actually our breeding tree of our rabbits, because we want to express different coat types, and it's going to be called Tracking What Rabbits Do Best. Okay, so I showed you that last viz to say you kind of have to have a holistic view of what you're doing. This is where it goes back to that original image of Uncle Sam and Lady Liberty. Like, there's a lot riding on how you're displaying these images, and you need to make the right choice to share that information correctly versus dramatically. So just like with, thinking I was going to have all these great nut bushes and silverberry bushes, the next thing that I have is I have a big pond. I have a pond that's about twice the size of an Olympic skating rink. It's 10 foot deep. It's about 20 to 25 million gallons of water. And we were told the second that we moved in, if you stock that with trout, it will pay for everything you want on the farm in the first year. Unfortunately, I don't really own that pond in a sense. We're stewards of that pond. Yeah, it's on my property, but our house was built 220 years ago. So we don't really feel too much ownership of the land. We're just trying to regenerate and get it moving. Beavers depend on that pond, great blue herons. We have hundreds of species of wild birds that come through, about 10 to 15 that are rare or endangered. And right now, so last year we had Batch the beaver. This year we have Odin the otter, who's actually out on the pond right now. He seems to be finding plenty of fish, and they eat crawfish because it's a spring-fed pond. But the pond is basically an area we're leaving alone, or we're making the decision that, yeah, we could go for the glory and make a quick buck. Yeah, you can make a Sankey chart because it looks cool, but it might not be the right one. It's if you're not expressing it, if you're being disingenuous about how you're spending the information, it comes out. Part of that sustainability is doing the right thing. So one of the doing the right things, especially in Tableau Public, is citing your sources. If you are inspired by someone, if you watched a how-to video, obviously your data and your image sources, if you don't have direct permission, you really should cite those all the time. One of the first tricks I learned was to make basically a source credits worksheet. So just create a quick Excel sheet with a couple columns in it where it says like data source name, a link, and a description to that source. You then bring in that data source, make a quick chart, shape chart. So you can hover over any one of the marks. You can see a quick description of what it is, and you're giving the credit out loud. And if someone's really curious, like a judge, for example, they can click on the link and go right to your underlying data source and validate where you got it from. It's a small thing, but this is really important kind of for a general healthy community. And also, I just think they look nice. I think it's a nice way to display those rather than giving a big list of all your sources. Having this little interactive chart as part of it is good. So this is on my Iron Viz entry. This is kind of how my cover sheet works. So you could hover over any one of those stars on the right side, see where the images came from or where the data came from. And the last one, this is, second to last one, this is the tip I got from Chantilly Jaggernaut. She calls it the grandma test. I call it the mom test. So find someone not in your workspace, show them your workbook, and don't argue with them. Just let them play with it, observe where their mouse is going. Don't overly try to explain what everything is doing. If they can't figure it out, it's failing that Gen Pop test, and maybe you need to dumb it down. Maybe you need to add in some words to tell people how to use stuff with arrows pointing to it. at the farm, we always need help on the left. So that little jungle gym is actually one of the tractors that we use to pasture raise our rabbits. It's circular, so they can run around in a circle and stretch their legs and get a lot of exercise as opposed to being in a little cage. And our kids like to go in there and bunny bathe. So they lay down on the ground with sunflower seeds on them, and the rabbits crawl all over them. In that middle picture there, if you see the little duckling in a pot, that's our brooders inside. And this is a little detail of farmer life. What my wife is doing there is curing what is called plug butt. So that is where basically their poop cakes on their butt. And if you don't get a Q-tip and clean it off, they will get backed up. So poop is a big part of farmers' life, and you just need to get over that. It's a big part of it.
The things we needed to know.
That's right. You can see my two kids working very hard there at, I'm not sure what, digging up a tree, I think. And we do love our work. And you can see my wife all the way on the right there. She has one of her little chickies on her shoulder. So just like this presentation, any one of your visualizations that you do, you want to bring it home. Don't take off if you hadn't already figured out how to land. And this was the tip that I got from Jonathan Drummey. So this is how I close my viz. I wanted to give direction to people, and I'll give it to you guys now. You've seen the peril with grocery stores and our food distribution system as it stands. Some of you may know that we waste about half of the food that we produce. Instead of spending $1,000 a year on produce, spend $500 in July or spend $500 in January with a local CSA, that's Community Supported Agriculture. It's a small farmer near you, and they will give you probably either 10 or 20 pounds of produce every single week, or they have pick your own. So it's different all over the place. Small farmers it's such a big gap that we need to refill. And I want people to know that even if you're in an apartment, you can be a farmer. You have a small herb garden, you can have 1 or 2 chickens. Just herb gardens alone will save you a ton of money. But seriously, people, start growing and making your own food. Pre-World War II, everybody had their own vegetable garden. That's where they were from. The term victory garden is a serious thing. That pretty much wraps it up for me. I think I'm right at 25 minutes on the mark. I didn't go too long, Katie. So I appreciate you listening. Again, please participate in your local agriculture. Look up the CSAs around you. It's a safe, clean way to get great food. Follow me on Twitter at Data Not Doctrine. Again, the Boston Tableau user group at Boston Tug. And if you have any questions about this presentation or some of the other things that I show, or agricultural in general, feel free to reach out to me by email at datanotdoctrine@gmail.com. And that's it.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Will. And you're right. I feel like this is a very timely topic. Maybe definitely not intended, didn't pick it because of it, but yeah, very, very timely. I want to open it up for anyone who does have questions. Feel free to send those over. Remember, you're going to want to use the Q&A part of the Zoom platform. So we've had a couple of communications there so far. No real questions. Definitely some folks mentioning that you shared some great tips, and I agree. Lots of things that I either hadn't thought about before or haven't ever tried to accomplish myself in Tableau.
So we are recording this, and you'll be able to go and view it later. So I know I went through a lot of those tips quickly, but like how the quick fixes to make a jitter plot, some of the from zero sizing. In a professional sense, I use that all the time. The only other thing I was throwing there is stories. So if you're presenting, there are so many advancements in getting PowerPoint into Tableau and Tableau into PowerPoint. And I want to shake people and say, they already have that, right? You can just make a story and kind of, build your progression of ideas that way. So my dashboard that I'm showing today is a story itself. Like I use that story format. Traditionally with Iron Viz or like on Tableau Public, you'll see the big, long, scrolling infographics. And you think, oh, I don't want those for work. I just want a PowerPoint. That's what stories are. Use stories.
Yeah, I agree. Awesome.
No questions?
Like saying, enjoyed the presentation with a different perspective. Thanks. And I agree. I have a question for you because you mentioned like you like making your own data and you come up with this just really creative stuff. So I know part of it comes from things you care about, right? You biz about agriculture. But where do you get inspiration for creativity? I guess like what helped you think,
Yeah.
hey, Uncle Sam, hey, these colors?
So one is keeping yourself inspired. I have, you can see my office behind me. I have lots of books. I have lots of art books. I have little Dusty Cabrera on my shoulder. I'm on Tableau Public a lot. I get a lot of inspiration from that space. The rest of it is what's around me. So my, like I did a viz on taking samples of dirt from around my property. So, that was something functionally I had to do and decided to make a visualization out of it. One was like my guitar viz. It was a very similar concept to what Steve Fenn did with his Hendrix viz, where it was a heat map over the top of the guitar. I play guitar about every day. I play little songs for my kids. I've always had music around me. So I decided to start recording and start tracking the songs that I would play and then make a viz out of it. So I had, it has to be really personal to me. I think, like in most people's profiles, if you go back and look at my profile, there's this like 2-month span where I did Makeover Mondays every week. And then I realized, I didn't love doing that. Now don't get me wrong. I love Makeover Monday. I love Andy. I love Eva. I love all those people involved with it. It's one of the first things I tell people to do when I'm hosting or doing Tableau training. But because I do this so much all the time, it really has to be personal. So the things that I've got the best response on, like my Hendrix viz, my death penalty, my history of execution viz, those are things that I spent a lot of time researching and going into. So like the rabbit one I'm working on now, rather than kind of spitting out something every week, I've been working on this one viz for about 3 months. So yeah, the inspiration's just what's right in front of me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think I dream up a lot of ideas for visualizations and potentially even start recording the data, and then they just don't make it out on the page. So maybe this will be.
Yeah, that'll happen. I have a notebook. I keep a couple journals, and we have a lot of notebooks around that we keep. I'll walk around the farm. We've logged every species of plant and tree across our property, and we're working on mapping some of that out. But yeah, I have stuff I write in the back of a napkin, or I have a folder on my desktop that's called my Viz bucket, and it's stuff that I'm 10% into and have just dumped in there. And those are the things that you'll find. In my experience, those are the things that you'll find that when you're, I don't know, just trying to clean up your desktop, you'll go back and see it. And all of a sudden you had some great idea on that one. So yeah, never delete anything, never throw anything away. Just keep a folder, keep a bucket. You'll come back to it if it's important.
Awesome. All right, we'll check Q&A. Patrick would like to know if you're still a Tom Brady fan.
I never was, actually. I'm a Steelers fan. So I'm a big Steelers fan. You probably can't see on my Steelers stuff in the corner, but yeah, no, I don't have a very strong opinion on it. I know where I live, so I'm a pilgrim in an unholy land.
Good answer.
Yeah.
All righty, very cool. Well, I am going to grab the screen from you for a bit. Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
Perfect. So with the time that we have left, like I mentioned, we enjoyed going through Will's perspective of the design process. And I think to kind of shift the focus a little bit, we talk about being creative and we talk about having all these, maybe new and exciting or special to us ideas. And what I've found is that I want to try to incorporate some of those lessons that I learned through building personal visualizations in the work that I do every day for the company that I work for. So to give you a little bit of background before we jump into a couple of tips that I have for you, I, about a year ago, switched from consulting into a commercial real estate company, and I work in human resources, or our people team. And this was a new adventure for me, right? I'm kind of learning everything from the ground up, but I think that that's helpful because it helps for me to understand the audience who's consuming the data that I'm sharing, it's new to them as well. So it's new to me, it's new to them, and I've definitely learned a lot about the space over the past year. What I want to share with you is one of the projects that I worked on. A couple of the components that I felt were helpful in encouraging interactivity with the audience that I was building this dashboard for, as well as kind of giving the user what they want, right? Will, you made a comment about if it doesn't pass the mom test, don't, argue with someone. And I think that that's huge, because it's really easy for us to say, no, you just don't get it. You're just not clicking where you're supposed to. It's much more difficult for us to step back and say, okay, maybe the way that I've designed it isn't accommodating the audience. Maybe the way that I think about this approach isn't the same that other people would think about the approach. So hopefully by sharing this kind of experience with all of you, you can pick up on some of those tips.
I'll just jump in, Katie, while you're setting up. And
Yeah.
that's one of my favorite things about Makeover Monday, is that you could see how hundreds of different analysts and data artists would approach the same data set, trying to make over the same visualization, and you could see all these perspectives to it. So even all of us who are speaking that same language of analytics and data visualization, we have very different takes on how to approach the data. So just imagine if you didn't know anything about that and you were literally just commenting on the picture and expecting it to work like an app.
Exactly.
That's a great point, Lex.
Exactly. So to set us up a little bit, this project that I was working on, the goal of it was to provide some foundation, fundamental, common human resources or people metrics to the team in an exploratory way for them to understand a specific population. So I work for a commercial real estate company, and one branch of our company helps service buildings for our clients. So you might have janitors, you may have HVAC, you may have folks just generally helping out around the physical building, helping to make sure that everything runs smoothly. And we refer to those as our technicians. So the idea was, how do we create an experience to better understand those technicians, who they are, where they are? Do we have anyone who's maybe nearing retirement age? Just some kind of basic information about that group. So I'll share with you, this is a anonymized, I guess, screenshot of the information. Obviously, a lot of the numbers are gone, and so you're missing some context here, but hopefully it gives you the idea. One of the challenging components about this experience was that this group of users that we were sharing this data with weren't maybe as familiar with the interactivity in Tableau. So I think it's probably pretty common for most of us to see a drop-down menu and know that we can select it, make a change. But I don't know that it's as obvious or maybe as common to general non-Tableau users that, hey, you can click on a chart. I can click on a bar, or I can click on a line, and that's going to encourage some kind of interactivity within the view. And so one of the things that I wanted to make sure was as clear as possible for these users was what to do with this dashboard. And so just a couple of pieces to point out. In the upper right-hand corner, we've got these little instructions that we built in. Hey, pick a globe, pick any chart with this little icon next to it, this little click icon next to it. And for me, that was important because not every one of these visualizations is interactive. We've got kind of some big numbers up at the top, looking at things like turnover and the number of hires. Those are more informative and not necessarily interactive. Whereas if you wanted to find out information about a specific division, or if you wanted to look into a certain account, I wanted to make sure that it was clear to the users they could click in those areas. But like Will mentioned earlier, I did want to make sure we were using kind of that background, that wireframe color. Not necessarily the most prominent thing on the dashboard, but just a little added context for our users. And then something that I have always personally found is maybe a little bit challenging whenever you're new to Tableau is understanding this idea of the reset button, the revert button inside of Tableau Server. And I'm sure that there's lots of great ways to do this, maybe even equipping your dashboard inside of some kind of website or portal that allows for this interactivity maybe to be even easier. But for our use case, it worked to be able to just tell the audience, hey, if you need to reset the whole thing, if you just kind of need to go from the beginning, that revert button can be helpful for you. I will throw in a note that if you are in Tableau Server or Tableau Online and you put this dashboard into full screen view, I believe that that toolbar menu goes down to the bottom of the screen. So that from a wording perspective could be a little bit confusing because it says in the upper left toolbar, but I kind of made the decision to go with what I thought most users would interact with, and that's the view you're seeing. Also going to give a quick little shout out to the draft sticker that I placed on here. I think that having some notification of where you are in the development process is helpful, especially because, as we're going to get into, the audience that I was building this for wanted it to be interactive, but they also needed to be able to take static images of this information to, like you said, Will, put into PowerPoints or to email to someone. And in the perfect world, everyone would interact with it on Tableau Server, but that's just not the case in all organizations. So I think having that draft sticker during the preparation process when we were testing it out with the users was helpful to say, hey, we're not completely done. These numbers haven't been 100% fully validated. And to make sure that if a screenshot was taken, we could kind of, give an indicator to those users whenever they went to share that data. So those were two kind of main components of the interactivity piece. But what I found the most challenging was this idea of, all right, I can click on a bar, or let's say that I want to break it out by gender, for instance. I can interact with these visualizations, but there's nothing telling me what I've clicked on. Now, if you're familiar with Tableau's interface, you know that typically when you click on a bar, where you interact with something, it is going to kind of highlight, right? It's going to make everything else that kind of pastel color, and it's going to highlight the bar you've clicked on. So I'll just kind of show it in this scenario. Cool. That's fine, except I'm using gray as my bar color. And what we noticed is that it was kind of hard to see. You'd click on one bar and it would become its color, and everything else would be a little more muted. And those muted bars weren't that different from the gray color we were using. One of the options, yes, could have been, hey, let's change the color. But I wanted to make it even more clear to the users. So because I can't share with you the actual dashboard and interact with it, I kind of mocked up in Superstore what we were trying to accomplish with the interactivity on this view. It starts off by letting us know we can click any chart and that it's shown for all transactions. But what I wanted was this idea, and maybe breadcrumbs not the perfect word, but this idea of a subtitle that automatically updates as I make different selections. So instead of saying we're looking at all of the transactions, when I click on March 2012, now we see that it's shown for March 2012 transactions. And if I also click on this small pack, you can see that that subtitle updates again, shown for March 2012 small pack transactions. And I think one of the benefits of this is you can customize that sentence or that phrasing to be whatever makes the most sense for your audience. You can add in different components to make it very readable. If I take a screenshot of this and I share it with someone, they know exactly what the population is that they've narrowed down to. And that was really important in our scenario because you might click on a specific client and filter down to a specific division. You might be looking at a different point in time than the current point. And there may be 5 or 6 other dashboard filter actions that you've interacted with. So to accomplish this, I wanted to bring together some components that I knew about. And I'll just kind of do a brief introduction to the big helper in this scenario. And that's what Tableau calls a set inside of the tool. So for those of you that aren't familiar with a set, it's kind of like a saved filter. It's sort of like a dynamic group. It's similar to those other pieces of functionality within the tool. And one of the things that I was able to use a set for was helping me define the definition of who counted as this technician population. I was given a list of job codes, one way to kind of organize the data. And with additional logic, we basically said, if you as an employee are part of this job code, then we want to see your head count. We want to see the number of people that we have in the organization with those job codes. And we could have filtered, but we needed to make comparisons to the larger population as well. So it was helpful to have this kind of built-in subset of data for our technicians and then be able to compare that to everyone else. So just a real basic start to this, our set is going to be created from a dimension. So in my case, I might right-click on my job code dimension and then create a set. And I'll just call this our technician job codes. I don't think I could work in Tableau without copy paste. It saves my life all the time. So copy my list of job codes. And then inside of our new set dialog, which you probably notice looks a lot like the filter dialog, I can Control V, I can paste that list of job codes. So that's super helpful for me. And how this is different than the filter is that it's not automatically going to go on the filters card. And instead of just being able to show the components in this filter, only show these job codes, by its default, a set can be used as this kind of in versus out. So to show you an example, if I pick up this set and I drag it over to the column shelf, we can see this idea of in versus out. If I want to separate which job codes were in or out of the set, maybe I'll move it over to rows. So you can see kind of how it's similar in some ways to a filter, but then also helpful and different. And the reason that we like this for our technician definition is that I could then say in a calculated field, if, see if we can make this a little bit bigger. If for that line, for that person or that record that we were looking at, if they had one of the included job codes, I'm just picking up my set from the data pane, dragging it into my calculated field, and that's all I need. I don't have to say if set is in or if set is true. I can just say if it's inside of this technician job codes, then we want to see the head count. And that's a way for us to add a bunch of logic. This list might change in the future. We may get a totally different subset of job codes or titles that we need to look at. And so it kind of keeps it as this little saved list for me and helps me to reference it inside of the calculation. So those are just a couple of basics on what a set could be used for. There's many, many, many other options, but that's what I use it for at work most often. And so I wanted to take that idea and Tableau's newer set actions and basically say, if I create a set and I allow some interaction from my user to populate what's in the set. We're basically letting the user who's interacting with the dashboard pick the in group of the set. Then we could display it back on the page. So we're kind of using the interactivity to then burst it out into the subtitle. So in this particular scenario, we've got 3 different charts here. I'll just kind of show you for one of them how this might work. The first thing that I'll point out is when I click on one of these bars, the other 2 charts are going to filter. And that is not the set action. That is our dashboard filter action. So when I click on delivery truck and the line and the bar to the right update, that is because of the filter action. The fact that in our subtitle, we now see the words delivery truck, that comes from our set action. The very first thing that we need to make this work is a set. So you can see that for my worksheets, in the bottom left-hand corner of that data pane, I've created a few different sets. But just to show you how this might work, if I were to click on customer segment, right-click and say create, and then set, that's all that I need. I don't have to select any of these boxes. I don't have to change anything about this placeholder, because remember, your audience, your user, is going to be the one who's inputting which of these components they want to check off or filter by on the screen. So we could just kind of build this blank or open set. To make this work on the dashboard, we're going to need to create that set action. So if I go up into the dashboard menu in the upper left of my dashboard screen and I choose dashboard actions, we can see that in the newer versions of Tableau, in the bottom left corner, we have a new action type called change set values. And that's what we're saying. Let the interactivity on the screen, on the dashboard, decide what is in versus out of my set. We're going to open up our ship mode set action, take a look at it. What we're saying is from the source sheet, which is where are we interacting, we're interacting with the transactions by ship mode bar chart. So when my user interacts with this chart, we also say run action on, which is basically how. Do they hover over it? Do they actually click on the bar? Or do they have to choose the hyperlink inside of the tooltip to make this action happen? We just wanted them to be able to click on the bar. So we run it on a select. And then we said, okay, well, what happens? What's influenced? What changes when I interact with this view? And what we've done is we've said in our sample superstore data set, I want this to influence the ship mode set. This last piece helps us with the idea of what's the default version of the subtitle sentence versus what's the active version of that subtitle sentence. Because I've chosen remove all values from the set, when we clear our selection, when we click on that bar again, the set goes completely blank. So there's nothing added to the sentence. Delivery truck goes away because there's nothing selected in the set. And that works because we've said, when I clear the selection, I want to take away all of the in values of my set. So from transactions by ship mode, we're going to click on the bar. That's going to influence our ship mode set. Now, our final component that we need to add here is the subtitle or the view. This isn't a traditional subtitle. It's actual text on a worksheet that we're just treating as a subtitle. And to be able to customize what it says in its default unselected position versus its active selected position, I've just created a calculation that references the set. So for instance, if we look at the ship mode label, we can see that it says if ship mode set, so remember, just like job codes from earlier, if job code, this is the equivalent of saying if the value is in the set. So when I click on delivery truck, it becomes the in portion of the set. If that's happening, then we want to add a space to the sentence plus the ship mode, the delivery truck that's been selected. Otherwise, we just want to keep it blank. These two quotes without anything between them, that's what gives us just our blank placeholders in the default sentence for our view. So if we've selected something in the ship mode visualization, then add a space, give me the ship mode name. Otherwise, just leave it blank. And I think the cool piece of this is that you get to really choose the narrative that's happening in this subtitle. So for instance, in our ship date label, this one's got a bit more to it. We're saying if you've selected a date, then we want to look at the month name and the year. So I wanted to format it to say, for instance, March 2020. If you haven't clicked anything, remember, if we clear the date set, it's going to go back to empty. When it's empty, it should say all of 2010 through 2013. So you get to really choose what that narrative says. You get to put in even the correct grammar for the sentences that you're creating by adding in this kind of dynamic portion. All of those components, just to kind of wrap this up, can be seen here on our text button. I've brought over each one of these little label calculations that I've built, put them onto our text field, and you can see that I've just put them right next to each other. There's no spaces in between them. There's nothing separating them. They're all just kind of bunched up together. And those different dynamic components are what makes our sentence, our little kind of breadcrumb subtitle up at the top. So those are just a couple of pieces that we added to hopefully make this experience a bit better for our users, and to make sure that if they were going to take a screenshot or export the image of it, that they knew exactly how they had filtered the data on the page. I know we're at the hour, so if some of you have to drop, I appreciate you joining us. I'm going to stick around for any questions that you might have, so feel free to send those over in the Q&A box.
Great job, Katie.
Thank you.
So first question, I love the analytics Mad Libs. Those make great subtitles when you're kind of, that's a really clear way, executives particularly, they love seeing that in there, and it makes everything nice and clear.
Right.
Great demo on set actions. The first question I have here from Patrick is, can you select multiple values?
Yeah. So that's the one thing, right? It's like, hey, let's break it. What doesn't work? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
The answer is you could potentially make that work, right? I don't have it set up that way. So for instance, if I click delivery truck, well, let me put it this way. If I click different values from different sheets, if I click delivery truck and then jumbo drum, it works fine because those are separate worksheets. However, if I click delivery truck and regular air, you can see that it's just kind of going with, oh, here, let me control click. It's just kind of going with regular air. Now, would it be possible to kind of change the narrative and make that happen? I bet it would be. In our scenario, we weren't having users select more than one item anyway. was kind of pick one from each of those charts. So I didn't necessarily take the time to build that out, but it's a perfect question because I'm sure if some of you are using this, you would need to add that functionality as well. So I'll be curious to see if anybody's got any cool ideas for that. Or yeah, there you go. So Patrick's saying first value, last value.
Yeah, I think you could do it with a window or a zone function. I would probably just layer my calculations. I do a few layers of it.
Right.
You end up in a lot of complexities if you're trying to use those same data fields in your kind of like Mad Lib sentence structure. Like when you're building those out, you'd have to create those separately.
Right.
But yeah, it's probably a good way to go about it, Patrick, with a window or zone function.
Yeah, I'm calling that a NOLA tug challenge because I would love to see that work. It's been a while since I've built this out for this view, but I think that would be really cool. What else we got? Any other questions?
Yeah, drop line on that line chart. I don't see any other questions in here. Let me check the chat real quick. Tim Katie just saying how much he likes the idea of having like the draft or the work in progress. The other thing that I'll throw in, because that is great, because you do see a lot of people kind of copy and pasting. For a long time, I worked in that, as I'm glowing here, in the fraud industry, and the questions were like, what minute and second did this thing happen? So I also say that no matter what you're doing, if it's work facing, you should have a timestamp somewhere on your dashboard that's always in the same place in the top right corner or the bottom left corner, just like the legend on a map, and let people orient themselves like, yeah, this is work in progress and it was last updated on this exact date. You might think, hey, they could just see it where the line chart ends, but it is really important. So do put if it's a work viz, having a timestamp on there is really good too.
Yeah, I agree. That's great.
And that's an easy thing to do. Just find your date function, put the max in, and bring that out there.
Yeah. Patrick mentioned that he's got some free time that's opened up recently, which sounds like a pretty common thing. So hopefully you'll be able to figure that out. I will mention that if any of you are interested in kind of looking at that workbook, reverse engineering it, whatever you need, it is on my Tableau public profile, and you should be able to download it. So if that's helpful for you, it should be out there.
And I do want all of you to become small farmers, but if you're looking for extra time, we don't have any up here. So early days and late nights, especially when you're doing 2 full-time jobs. But seriously, please go plant an herb garden today. Dig soil. Start calling it soil, not dirt, a pasture, not a lawn, and you'll be in the right direction.
I like it. We had our first watermelon pop up in the garden today, so I'm really excited.
There you go. Yeah, no, you guys down there. I can't even plant my seedlings until after Memorial Day with how cold it is up here. So
yeah,
we just got about 8 inches of snow in 3 hours last night. So.
Bananas. All right, y'all. Well, thank you to all of you for joining us. I know we went a little bit over. I'm happy to stick around and chat. Patrick's got some questions for soil moisture. So we'll let him answer those. But thank you to all of you. I hope that you have a wonderful remainder of your day wherever you're at. And we look forward to chatting with all of you in the future. If you're ever physically in New Orleans, please not right now, but any other time in the future, be sure to get connected with us so you can come stop by and say hey. And for all of our locals, thanks for joining, and y'all stay safe.